Sorry. So this is just a workshop for just a little bit about sustainability partners and infrastructure as a service and what they do, what they offer. And to start off, if I could have Ursula from Water Co-op. She's gonna start off with a little testimony on how it works for them. Go with that.
You want me to come up there? Right here.
If you could, please.
Oh, man.
It's not. Yep.
Well, I will tell you that if you go on to Sustainability's website, you can see a great testimonial on there. They asked me to do a testimonial for them, so I did. The biggest thing that I can say about sustainability that we liked is in talking to them, it is not one size fits all. It's not like they're going to come to you and tell you, oh, well, this is what the co-op did, so this is what you have to do. We started talking to them because we applied for a grant twice, didn't get it, unfortunately, but they were there to bridge that gap so that we could get started. So we got started on it, and then they were there to make it all work. When we found out we didn't get it, we were already in the middle of it, and we'd already decided that that's just what we were going to do. So,
Can you just kind of tell us exactly, there's people, what it is they did for you? I don't know what it is.
so basically, sorry about that. So basically they, in theory, I mean, I don't know all the correct terminology, but they financed the meter change out for us, all of it. And now the way we did it and the way it works is we don't own those meters, really. Sustainability does. So right after we put them in, so we finished in August of 2023. And then we came around at the beginning of 2024 in February and had that horrible ice storm. We lost 6 residential meters, I think. Roughly 6 or 8. I didn't have to go buy new meters. I just called my Connect at Sustainability and said, hey, we lost 6 meters. And they said, okay, here. So they take all of that on that side of it. And I hope I'm explaining that right, Ryan. But that's just the way we do it. So for us, it worked because now we've got it's just an operating expense for us on what we pay them for their monthly use.
How long did it take to get the meters changed whenever you called them? Like from the time you notified them to the time they changed?
I already had them changed out. I had them. That's one of the things that I did with Connor from Sustainabilities and Resource Wise is I told him I've got to have some in stock because whether they get run over by a semi or whether they freeze or somebody new comes in and wants a new meter. So I do keep a few on my shelf. They're just not inventory anymore.
So they did the initial change out and then you take care of any that have problems. Is that the agreement?
Well, yes. So L&T Services, which is outside, is from the Farmington area. They came in and did the whole meter change out. She sent her crew down here. They worked with Aaron from Resource Wise, and they just did the whole meter change out. I mean, they come down and work for 10 days to 2 weeks. And then they might be gone for 2 weeks and then come back for 2 weeks, and they just did it like that. And I'm not sure exactly how that side of it got worked, except for we were involved in all of that. I mean, we just had a great relationship with everybody, with Resource Wise, with Sustainability, with L&T Services. I mean, you can even ask Connor from SP. I mean, he basically said that was the easiest meter change out he'd been involved in since he started it. I said that was because there was 2 women in charge. But so now what we pay them on a monthly thing is just an operating expense for us. But it's just nice because they do allow us to keep some meters in stock so that, and now anytime we do anything, because if we've got one, because if you do go with this, I guarantee you, you're going to have people call you and say, oh, these meters are wrong. They're wrong. They don't work. I don't use that much water. Yeah, you do. You've been using that much water. We just weren't billing you for it because we had old mechanical meters that didn't work. So we'll go out there and we'll tell them, okay, we're gonna put this new one in and we're gonna let it run for about 15 days. And we don't usually even have to let it go that long. We can go about 3 days and they go, oh, yeah, I guess I do have a problem. And then we'll go put the old one back in, or we may even leave that one in and call it good. And then the other thing they did for us that we actually have some training for this week is we got this from Aaron at ResourceWise. It's a ground mic. And so one of the things with the Camstroke meters is the ALD, the automatic leak detection, which it'll tell you, Mike can testify to that part of it. That's actually not this part of it. So in that there is the whole system. So it'll, every morning when my office staff comes in, they pull up stuff and they look at all the leak codes. They'll look at leaks and bursts. Bursts isn't always 100% accurate because if you go out there and turn a faucet on to water some animals, it'll show a burst code, but we can tell it'll go right back down. But the leak codes, like in Mike's instance, we can tell after a 24-hour period, it's going to tell us how many gallons of water is going through that meter every hour. So we can tell you, we don't know what it is, check your toilets, check your frost freeze, check all of those things. But now the ALD is on your infrastructure. So it's on your main lines. We're still learning it, but we can go on to one of the leak detector and it'll tell us, okay, well, you've got a sound, it's spiking on South Roosevelt Road T and the 400 block. We'll go out there automatically then and we'll start driving around looking for a leak. We've been able to find it a couple of times, but so far some of them haven't surfaced yet. Well, with this ground mic, we'll be able to go out there and, for lack of a better word, use it like a metal detector, except it's a water detector. And hopefully we'll be able to walk that main line and find that leak.
Is it listening for the water running? Is that what it's listening?
Mhm. I don't know a whole lot about it yet because we just got it and it's still in a box and we're having training on. Yeah, so we won't start on that thing on Kilgore till Thursday afternoon.
And I'll pitch in a little bit on the leak thing. I don't know how it works for everybody else, but we have a property that has 3 trailer houses on it, and the girls called me from the office, said, you got a leak out there, we don't know where. You know, we checked toilets, we checked outside bibs, we checked all that, got all that fixed, and went back, talked to them and said, no, it's still a little bit there. 5 days later, all of a sudden a leak popped up in the yard. That's the kind of stuff right now we're having, you know, it was absolutely great, because that's a large bill with 3 properties on it.
Yes.
And it made a lot of difference for us, and I think that would really help us in the city if we could.
I
Without
called-
manpower having to do all.
And the nice thing too for us is like with me, yeah, because I called Greg on Friday. I mean, we were closed, but I've got remote sign into my computer. And so I just got on my laptop couple of times on Friday, but got in there Friday morning and I was like, oh shoot, I better call Greg because I knew it wasn't a place where he was at, where he lived. Same thing with Mike. I mean, so it's just kind of nice, or you've got people that are out of town. And, you know, before it's kind of probably like with you guys, we went 30 days before we went back out there and looked at that meter and said, oh, shoot, it's turning. I mean, we had one family that. So 2023, right before we started the meter change out, this was in January, just our members alone, and there wasn't but maybe 6 of them. They lost over 1.5 million gallons of water, just our members on their leaks. But it was right there during all that freeze. But there wasn't, you know, we had went back and read it December 15th. So we weren't going back out there. We didn't go back out there till January 15th, give or take 2 days either direction. Well, if it started 15 minutes after we drove off on the 15th, it went 30 full days before anybody saw it. Like Mike, if it's not surfacing, you don't know it's there. And that's the good thing about this thing is getting people to update their information, because the system will call them first. They'll get an automated phone call and then we follow up with them every morning. So But the ground mic, I didn't finish saying that. SP actually, that they paid for it. So it's just part of what we did. So we didn't have to come up with that money up front. I feel like I'm talking more about the meters than I am SP, but they do go hand in hand, but the meters are just what have made a huge difference with us. I was talking to Eldon the other day and just on preliminary numbers, and you guys can go back and look at it because you've got this information yourself, but we're down 30 million gallons that we've purchased from the city for 2024 from 2023. And I think a big part of that is the meters. It's just my opinion, but. And I think we'll get better as we continue to compile data and understand the leak detector on the main line side, because that's where we're losing more water, us personally, and that's where we're losing more revenue.
So you gotta be more profitable. If you're not paying for 30 million gallons. I mean, it's being accounted for. You gotta
Yes,
be more
no,
profitable.
yeah, so basically what I'm saying is, number one, we're able to, we're not losing as much on the customer side, because we're not going 30 days before we catch a customer leak. I think we've also, between all of us with stage 3 water restrictions and stuff, because I'll tell you right now, we're still on stage 3. We didn't change ours. We're still discouraging any kind of watering or anything like that, even after you guys did. And our system also sends them a text, email, or a phone call when it thinks and it knows that they're watering. It sends them one and says, hey, you're not supposed to be doing this. And most of them stop because they're kind of afraid of it. But I think it's conservation. I think it's the meters. I think it's a lot of different things. But yeah. And again, that's roughly, I don't remember exactly, but it was roughly 30 million.
So essentially, you're just paying sustainability to be the MDMS host. They hired the third party contractor. They manage the data, I assume. But who owns that data? Since they own the infrastructure, is it your data or is it the co-op's data?
So it's both. right?
Yeah.
So we provide access to it. We utilize it because we need to understand that the meters are functioning. Because we're basing it, the cost, what we do is we're taking all those upfront costs, whatever that system needs, right? Whatever it needs for you to perform and maximize the use of that system. And that's, I'm glad you brought up the ground mic. This is something that came after the fact. I don't even know if you asked about it, but I just told Aaron, I was like, well, are they maximizing the ALD components of the system? They're like, well, they are doing their best, but you got to understand there's a lot of distance between the meters. Like it's not obvious always immediately where that leak might surface. I was like, well, why don't we give them a mic then? Like, let's go ahead and do that so they can utilize that point. But we amortize all those costs over useful life of the system. The partnership there is that we have access, we have a dashboard where we utilize and track it for uses because we need to know if it's functioning. Because if there's a code that something's not functioning, it is our responsibility to replace it. Just like anything. So we have to have IoT, Internet of Things, just some sort of sensor tied to anything to know that it's functioning just from a billing perspective, but also from a maintenance perspective, because we're responsible for the maintenance over the long term. If anything goes faulty with that, we need to know this as soon as they can. Now, the co-op will also let us know, and they may know sooner, right? But as soon as that happens, and that triggers our mechanism to replace it. In the case of the freeze, we've left some so that there was an availability of some certain ones just for efficiency purposes. But let's say that freeze hit 100 of them. Well, you don't have 100 on the shelf.
Right.
So what we'll do is we have our contracted partner with ResourceWise that is a stocking vendor that has those in Albuquerque, get those out here as soon as possible. And the cost to install and flip all of that, we would keep that as well. We also build in financial protections to that, so that cost never gets passed along to the co-op. That's ours to assume, whether that be through an insurance claim, whether that be through manufacturer warranty defect, whatever it is. So we ensure that. But the data itself is not ours. The system, the co-op operates as if it's their own. We have access to that information because we need to monitor for maintenance and cost and any failures of that. But it's their data at the end of the day in terms of what they use for the customer side.
And they just pay you a monthly hosting fee for it, I
So
assume.
we include all of those costs into the monthly, so for the software, because look, if you don't have the software, it doesn't really matter how good the meters are because you don't know what's happening to it. So it's a full turnkey solution where we're including all the costs associated with that. from the cost of the materials to the installation, to the ongoing maintenance, to that, to the monthly software cost, to the training. Doesn't do you any good if you have this, if you don't know how to use it, right? So we include the training cost in that too. And we handle all that downstream procurement. So you have one point of procurement, which is us as a service, complete turnkey solution, anything you need to facilitate. And it's not something that we're, to Ursula's point, we're selling you, you need this. We're actually working with the city. We would work with the city to say, what is it that you need? What are your capabilities that you're trying to do? We have some communities where we don't necessarily have AMI, ALD, because they don't need that, or geographically it's not beneficial to them. So we would recommend maybe a cellular option or an ANR option or something of that nature. But the key is to get all the capabilities of a full turnkey solution that you need as a city to maximize the efficiency of your system, improve the conservation that you need, and ultimately financially stabilize your system. Because keep in mind, your water meter system is not just the brain and all the data that you need, it's also your cash register. If your cash register is broken, everything downstream of that is affected by that, including all the maintenance on your wastewater treatment, your water treatment, your pipes, anything else that you're associated that's affiliated with that system. So that's sort of our goal and our objective.
Thank you.
And I'll check with people online and see if they were able to hear him whenever he was speaking.
Oh, what?
And Chris, you might hand him those mics next time.
Yeah, I didn't think he was gonna go that long, so I was.
Y'all get to know Ryan. He does go.
You're speaking up very well. I think it might have been catching that on the mic, but I just like to know if they were able.
Did they hear?
We're able to hear. Thank you.
That's right, my former teacher projection.
Mike typed, I can hear him fine. Okay, yes.
Okay.
How has member feedback been on it? 4? Because the bills went up.
Well, I don't know, ask Mike. No, we didn't increase at all.
Well, if you're billing more, they'd be paying.
Yes, yeah, now that, yes, and that's the part that I was saying that the complaints we're getting is because they don't like that increase.
They're realizing how much they're using.
Yes, and that's, they're realizing, well, I had another one that I called on Friday and I said, hey, it looks like it's about 20 something gallons an hour going through there. Well, they left the water dripping, and you got to remember that on our system, we've got a lot of,
Paying some different.
well, and lower income, so they don't have the insulation and they've got to work a lot harder to keep things from freezing than some of us do. But yeah, and we've had some verbal altercations as far as, we've got 2 that went as far as to email Camstrup and said that our meters weren't working. But what they weren't understanding is the meter was working fine. What was happening was the collector wasn't getting the data. The meter had the data. We went out there and you've got that option. Once a week, we go out and do fallback reads because we'll look and see what meters are struggling to communicate with the collector. So we've just got one guy, and Ariel will make a folder in the office. Might have 15, might have 35 of them. You just never, depends on the weather.
How many collectors do you have?
2. We've got one on your water tower,
Right.
and then we've got one on our pump station on the Floyd Highway.
You own those or do they?
I think you guys own those 2, right? Yeah, because it's all inclusive in everything. So
So-
anything that it took, like Brian said, anything it took from the meters to the collectors, to the software, to the training, to everything.
And that's design included, because you'd have to decide how many collectors do.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So what we start with is a propagation study. We work with Camstrup to conduct that to determine how many were needed. And there's a copy of the propagation study that they did for the city of Portales in the folder in front of you, just to determine what those numbers are. Obviously, we're trying to maximize the reach. I'll let Dick get into during the presentation, sort of the technology and sort of how that works in terms of determining how many that needs. We utilize that prop study to know how many it is, and it just depends on geography. The project in the city of Portales, we actually envisioned as one. You're consolidated, you have relatively flat geography here. We have some projects like in the city of Angel Fire, which is, for instance, half of what you have here, but we have like 6 collectors up there just because of the terrain and the region, et cetera. So obviously that affects the overall project cost, but our goal is performance. So we're trying to reach that target of 98% of the data reads for that. So in order to achieve that, we're going to be looking to our partners to determine that. Now, we do have options because it's customizable then to say, well, look, there might be a handful out there that just aren't caught up with that. It's not really cost effective to put an extra collector all the way out there. Now, Camstrup offers a cellular option, so why don't for those few, we'll just include that in there. That might be a better option. We'll get down to that. There's a validation period, of course, for this, but ultimately, the goal is readability, predictability, and accuracy of that over time. We're tracking that.
Because that is one of the other things that we did is we put the meter themselves and has the antenna and stuff. And a lot of them work great, but some of them we had to go put an external antenna on. So we, same thing, got the external antennas through SP, didn't have to worry about put those on. Process now, we went out and we took a few of those external antennas and we stuck a T-post in the ground and moved that external antenna from the outside the lid up a little bit higher onto that T-post. Now I think we've got 6 cell meters coming because we've got just about that many, maybe 4 or 5 that just, we've done everything. And we just can't get, I mean, it'll get some reads, but then it won't. And our big thing with that is notifying people of their leaks. That's been mine and my board's biggest thing is I can get the consumption when I go out there because we'll usually do it right around the 15th or the 16th or whatever, because we build the 5th. Mine is just want to be able to notify people if they have a leak. That was our biggest thing with these was because we saw what was happening to people.
But it didn't eliminate your manual read?
No, we didn't. We're not manually reading. Now we will go do those fallbacks, but it's only one guy. And Aaron swears up and down, we're doing it way more than we have to, but.
It's just a select few.
Yes, yeah, that's what I said. I think the most we've had at any one time, and that was at the beginning, before we started weeding through them and adjusting antennas and doing other stuff, was probably maybe 40 or 50. And we've got it down now to probably about a dozen of them, and about 5 or 6 of those we know we're going to get cell meters on them as soon as we get them in.
So is it 15-minute interval data? How quick?
It's customizable, yeah. So depending on how your prop study is with the AMI, you'll see here in a little bit, they have like the Gallo structure is a daily read. We're guaranteed daily, and anything in the green is going to be an hourly intervals. So, and then back on real quick on her manual reads, when we're talking manual reads is no longer looking into pits.
Yeah.
We have a fallback method with each and every one of our meters that allows you to do a fallback drive-by system.
Yes.
So it'll still be on a drive-by where you don't have to get into a pit. It'll still collect the data through like a drive-by system. And every single one of our meters has that as a backup.
Yeah, so it does go a lot faster now. That's why I say I just have one guy. He grabs, well, he's got it on his phone because he's the only one that out of all of us that doesn't have an iPhone. He's still an Android holdout, which is great because that's what it's on. But if you don't, you've got the tablet. But yeah, Jason just goes out and he can easily be back. It probably takes us a little bit longer just because one of them is the children's home. And so he's, and we can't figure it out because all the rest of them read fine, but that one will not. That collector just doesn't like that meter at all. So, but a couple of hours, depending on how many it is and how spread out they are. But the other good thing too with this, and he explained it all, we're not nearly as advanced with the mapping as you guys are. And so this has helped us a lot because now our meters are that we have coordinates on them. So now they can even send me out there and I can give it up on my phone and get to it. Where before, some of our meters are in alleys and whenever we have all that wonderful rain and the tumbleweeds are this tall,
Mhm.
and you're afraid of snakes. I didn't want to have to get out and knock down tumbleweeds to read a meter, so now we don't have that problem. And now we know where they are, because we can get to them easier.
Mhm.
And it's helping us start to define our mapping too.
30-year life? What is the manufacturer's life on it? 30?
So we're warranted for 20 years, but then SP is going to 25 years for useful life.
Yeah, we amortize our costs over a 25-year time frame on these, but of course, if anything happens before then, we'll replace it, and that's not our cost.
You prorate the warranties or you do just? like
It's a 10-10 for the meters. So first 10's full, and then from 10 to 20 is prorated. I will say in New Mexico, we did a study. So Camstrip itself has a very reliable meter. Globally, we have less than 0.5% of failure across the world. Nationally, we're half of that. We're 0.25%. Here in New Mexico, it's way low. I think we have like 85,000 meters deployed in New Mexico, and over the last decade, only 5 have come back on the warranty.
How many in New Mexico did you say?
About 85,000.
I got other questions, but I want to hear the presentation.
Well, then,
Step all over.
good. Y'all know where I'm at, just call me. And like I said, I'm their biggest cheerleader, they'll tell you that, but it's been very helpful for us. Again, go back to your question. Yes, we've had some members that aren't happy,
Mhm.
but they're just not happy because now they're paying for the water that they're using. But I also think it's helped them be way more conscientious about what they're doing. Turning on a faucet and walking off, or
Mhm. Well, and that could go two ways. If you have customers that have, like, if you have an old infrastructure, right, you have old aging mechanical meters, and say 5% of your system is being changed out every year with the newer age meters, you're not catching up with your revenue, right? So that's where you get these hefty increases on your rate structure. And so what happens there is the 5 or 10% of the people that actually have new meters in your system are getting double hit, and it's kind of unfair, right? So you have the few people in your system that have new meters that are paying their fair share of exactly what water they're using, on top of the rate increase due to faulty meters, right? An aged system, and meters as a service, sustainability partners, they allow you to do a full turnkey package to make it fair across the board for every one of your customers.
Thanks.
do that. We better say, just in case.
That's okay. If you left, we'd just be at Travis.
Well, good evening, everyone, and really pleasure to be invited tonight to speak with you. My name is Ryan Mast. I'm the lead for New Mexico for Sustainability Partners. I live in Albuquerque, work throughout the state. Background is actually in emergency management, sustainable finance. So I've spent a career working usually small, large scale disasters. And part of the issue there is we were always trying to figure out how we can overcome upfront capital burdens, even those in inject and disaster funding into stuff that was never enough. And so we would piecemeal our recovery. And that's where you get these stories, national stories of large scale disaster recoveries that take 15, 20 years or maybe never happen. And it's because it's really difficult to overcome all the capital needs that you need to upgrade complete systems. And so that's really how I came to working with Sustainability Partners a few years ago. Maybe we'll go to the next slide if you could. We are a public benefit company that provides capital support and capacity for essential infrastructure. So we only work with public entities, and we support on infrastructure that's necessary. Like, we're not doing speculation projects, we're not building out things that aren't necessary, et cetera. We're only invest in essential infrastructure, and that's really key to helping the nation alleviate a multi-trillion-dollar deferred maintenance issue in our infrastructure systems, and that runs across the board from energy to water, wastewater to transportation. Our number one asset class by far is water meters, and within that, This actually makes a lot of sense, and the reason why is we were alluding to before, which is the fact that really the core of your water system is your water meter. It's the one that provides the data on what your usage is, on how much production you need to have. It's the portion that gives you your revenues to support the development of the balance of your water infrastructure. And so even when we talk to customers about other potential needs, whether that be upgrading their treatment plant, whether that be upgrading their service lines, et cetera, we actually start back with, well, what's the status of your water meter system? Because if your water meter system isn't functioning, isn't optimized, and everything else isn't going to be as fluid, you're not going to be able to go as far, and it's not as sustainable. And so that really actually comes down to the reason why we're called sustainability partners at its core. Is it's not about sustainability in the sense of reducing carbon footprint, et cetera. It's about creating a sustainability within your financial structure for your infrastructure. We've touched on this, and Ursula hit on a few of these components, and Vic did as well. But ultimately, what we've identified in the water meter space is mechanical meter performance declines over time. Declining performance leads to decreased revenue and also unhappy customers, right? And guys who are happy ratepayers. Ultimately, as Vic alluded to, your ratepayers are paying more for a declining service, whether that be that they're not getting as accurate of information, or you're having to increase your rates, but you're not actually improving the systems or the line. Or in the worst case scenario, you improve somebody's, but they're paying for everybody else's that aren't paying their fair share within the system, but you're never able to really catch up. And so in that system, you're actually creating a structure where you're upside down on your finances within your water system. So it's why when we come in, we look at turnkey solutions. It's our opinion that you should really try to figure out, how do you do a clean start from, it's not just improving all of your meter systems and all your meters within your system, but also giving you the data that you need to make informed decisions on other system improvements. And also, while we're looking at it, we're trying to find what is the best meter on the market, so that you are at least close to guaranteed as getting high performance that not only lasts on day one, but over the lifetime of that meter. That you continue to have that performance, because what we're trying to do is interrupt that cycle of deferred maintenance, where we basically create this choppy system of injecting little money into our system improvements. It works really well, and then it kind of goes down over time. It's like, oh no, now we need to put some emergency repairs back into it. All the while, you actually have declining performance over your overall system, because you haven't actually pulled in and maximized and optimized the revenues that you're able to have for it. In New Mexico, this has an even sort of larger impact, because it's not just about finances, it's about water availability and conservation. We are not in a state in which there's more water now than there was 10 years ago. It's going the other direction. And so it's even more critically important to be accounting all of those drops as much as we can, because the value of that over time for the sustainability of our communities is just so vital. Next slide. So I've touched on this a bit, but sustainability partners, we've been around for about 10 years now, and we're growing. We're in 15 different states, growing, doubling every year in terms of our size and projects. And the reason why is because we're able to come in and provide an alternative structure that's different from all other funding and financing sources that are out there, by creating an alternative to traditional purchasing of critical assets, and actually converting those into a month-to-month usage base. So what we've done is basically we've tied the performance of our infrastructure investment, or we've tied the money to the performance of the infrastructure investments, so that if for some reason the performance, or you're not getting the performance of the infrastructure that you'd like to see out of your infrastructure, you're not actually paying for it. So that's where it comes down to the conversion into a utility system. If you're not getting electricity delivered to your house, then you shouldn't be paying. You're not paying for the electricity usage. Similar to us, if your infrastructure is not performing for you, you're not paying for that. We assume that risk of performance over time, and we convert that. We do that in a month-to-month usage-based structure, so it's not tying down any of our customers to a long-term contract. Everybody asks what our term is we don't actually have one. It's a month-to-month term. So at any point with 30 days notice, you can essentially buy out or terminate that contract. And if any of those costs associated that are tied to the remaining useful life of the system, not tied to a set amount of investment into it, thereby giving you more comfort that we're actually trying to create and maintain your system at optimum performance, and also creating a responsibility for us to actually do so, Because if we let something fall into disrepair, then it actually has no value to us and or to you. Go to the next slide. So these are some of the characteristics of this structure. Again, we cover all the upfront costs. There's no upfront costs to the city for any of the infrastructure investments we put. We can come in as early as a design phase of a project and account for all the costs all the way up to design, install, construction, any commissioning of that, and then ongoing maintenance for that infrastructure. But we don't operate, right? So the asset remains in your control, remains in the city's control to operate as if it was your own. We're just making sure that we track the performance, we track it just to make sure that it's operational. We don't tell you how it should be operated. To terminate the contract with us, there's no termination penalties, there's no call fees, there's nothing of that nature associated with it. And we try to tie those monthly usage fees for that to the revenue streams. So for water systems and water meters is actually very easy, right? How many water meters are in use? And are you collecting revenue off of those water meters? So we tie it to a per meter per month basis. And then we have flexibility and tools that we can do to ensure that that's affordable and that these systems create sort of an instant return on investment for the community, whereby you're actually achieving more in your revenue savings, either through low flow calculations or water costs that weren't accounted for before, or for your maintenance schedule or your maintenance operators that have to go out there and do that, so that you're actually budget. This is more than budget neutral. Actually have a return on your investment. We don't have any customers that I'm aware of where our monthly usage fees was more than the revenue savings that they have. And in fact, usually it's very dramatically the other way, to where by doing a conversion, a full system conversion, they're receiving 30, 40, 50, sometimes double the monthly revenue that they were before the system was in there. They're taking that money and reinvesting it into other system improvements that have also been deferred within there. And so we don't know exactly what that number is because every system's different, but you can have a rough rule of thumb. If your system's older and you're having a lot of problems and you're at the sort of an end of life system, which it sounds like that there's characteristics of that for the city of Portales, that number in savings that you would have is going to be pretty dramatic for the city. We're cost plus. We don't mark up any of the goods or services. So in the folder there, you'll see what quotes we got from our vendor partners at ResourceWise and from DB Construction, which is another firm that we work with. That's the cost that we would pay. And we're fully transparent on that. If there's other costs associated over time, it's open book. We'll let you know what costs we're incurring for those. But the city would never see a bill for any of that. That's what we're paying. That's our investment into that. And then we're building up maintenance reserves over time to ensure that there's capital there in case there's any problems with it. Those reserves sit there and we apply those towards improvements over time. If at termination or when at the end of the life cycle of this, if they're not utilized, they get returned back to the city. They're not our money, they're your money. They're just sitting there to ensure that there's capital reserves there in case there's an emergency need for those funds. Of course, this just means that we focus on the maintenance and upgrades of the system over time. If there's a need to change what that infrastructure is, for example, we have to swap out a few of the meters for cellular because that's new technology, or we want to add a ground mic to that, fully customizable. We'll do that over time. If a collector needs to be upgraded because 6 years from now there's a new latest and greatest thing and it makes sense to do that, we'll work with you to get those upgraded so that you have a high performing system over time. And then, finally, we're monitoring that as well, but we're not doing it because we want to own the data. We're just monitoring for performance so that we know that everything is working appropriately for you. But anything that we see in our dashboard, you would also see, ResourceWise would also see, so that they can identify quickly any problems and resolve it many times remotely if they can. Next slide. So at the end of the day, again, former emergency manager, the reason why I love this is it's risk mitigation. It mitigates your risk on the capital side. We're fronting all the upfront cost on that, whatever it costs. We will put that forward to do that. On the system design, we're collaborating to make sure that you have the best system. So, and I want to take a moment to talk about that and why the partnership with Camstructure is so strong. Obviously, different meters cost different amounts. You get different performance from different ones. What we're looking for is high performance over time. And like we said, we're amortizing those costs over how long we estimate that performance is going to happen, because we're going to be incurring the cost for maintenance. So while Camstructure meter might be higher, more expensive on a per unit than other meters. For us, it's actually the cheapest meter we can offer through our service. And the reason because it's if you take the total useful life or the total cost of that over time, that's going to be a lower cost. It's just that's not the way our financial structures currently operate. So we're flipping that around and saying, what if we were able to offer communities best infrastructure out there, but at the lowest cost because it's higher performing? And that's sort of how the model really works. And that's why we can add that value by coming in and supporting a full system deployment. Long-term performance risk as well. If it doesn't work, you're not paying for it until we get it back up and running. Because on the shelf, that's going to be pretty quick. But if there's a delay for some reason, we're going to work as fast as we can to get it out there. Because if that doesn't happen, then you're not going to be on the hook for that cost. And I'm going to stop here for questions about that. And then I want to allow Vic to talk a little bit about the technology of the Camstruct and some of the features, because this is really the value of our partnership here is this really works good for us to help and provide the alleviate the upfront capital, but it only works really well if we have a product that actually is going to deliver what we say it's going to deliver. And that's where we can talk about the features.
So are you basically dealing in end use meters or at the wells sites also?
So
Would you
it's
do any of that?
Yeah, we would. And in fact, we would encourage you to do so because this is a math calculation and you really need to have accuracy of both sides. And that's it doesn't matter to us, but it would matter to you as a city to know that you have accurate money flow and, accurate counts on the water coming out. You're going to need to know that for reporting to the state as well. And all of these, and then also understand what that differential is so that you know where your water loss might be. Because again, we're providing the infrastructure. There is a step there afterwards where it has all these features, but if there's leaks in the system, that's something that you're going to have to figure out where it's at, right?
Or wells not pumping? Right.
Well, and it helps with the ALD too, right? To have that master meter that we call it on our side.
Yeah, that was the other question I was gonna make is, I don't know really how our system is laid out, whether we got meters currently in place in main lines somewhere that you're checking back to see that your usage is correlating with main line use or whether.
You talking about like a master meter?
Well, yeah, but I mean, like if you've got an 8-inch line, you got a meter on it, or you got a 4-inch line, you drop down to a 4-inch line and put a meter on it, or is it all just pretty much charged at a certain pressure and then you're just supplying it to the house?
Pretty much. It's just basically just a residential meter.
So you don't really have any kind of back check.
Nothing on the main lines.
No, we need to learn that we produce water in our lines. Remember, we learned that we produce water in our lines. We have a negative
Yeah, we're
loss.
making.
But anything that's needed for the system, and again, we don't just provide support for, it's not just meters, it's anything that's associated with it that makes the system perform. So a good example of that is in Angel Fire right now, where we're actually replacing 300 of their pit setters with a special customized pit setter because they needed those as well, because they just been broken forever and they just didn't have the money to fix those. We're like, well, we're not going to go and put a new meter into a broken pit setter, right? So let's fix the whole thing as we go. Whatever costs are associated, we'll just absorb, we'll add it to it. It'll be spread out across the overall cost of the whole project. So it really becomes on a month-to-month basis minimal.
So I guess this is a dumb question, but essentially Sustainability Partners is the lender. And then Camstruct or Resource Wise are the actual host of the service being provided. Is that?
For vendors?
Do what?
Yeah, Camstruct is the metering manufacturer, so I make the meters. Resource Wise is my distribution partner here, so we're the ones that technically sell the meters in New Mexico. And then Sustainability Partner would be our customer.
Right, you're the host of it all.
And then you got another vendor that's gonna do all the install.
We'll do the install, yeah, and we have multiple ones we use. We've quoted, and again, we're agnostic on that, but we've quoted and engaged a firm called DB Construction that Resource Wise uses for installations here in the state as well. We've got a contract with them as well. That we use L&T services for this one. The reason for DB, the shift there is actually it's just a scale thing. They have larger crews so they can get it done faster. And for this, we're envisioning we'd be able to get it done in less than a year, full meter swap out for the whole city.
And just so you guys know, we work really well together. We constantly have meetings. I mean, it's not just like they're sitting there saying, here's some money, go at it, right? Like we have weekly meetings all the time just to go over project details. I'm one of the project managers, so I'm out there in the field helping out with this stuff. When when Ursula talks about like situations that come up, I mean, that's really where Resource Wise comes out. Says, hey, you know what, let's analyze this. Let's go back with Ryan and say, hey, this is what we're finding. Maybe we have to adjust some numbers, right? We have to adjust what we're going to put out in the field. But we figure that out. I mean, it's really a holistic solution. And that's really the great thing about working within this system is you don't have to sit there and say, I just want to put in, we can only afford to put in X amount of meters, right? We're doing the whole thing. Like with Angel Fire with the pit setters, I mean, we're putting whole new cams in. Just whatever it takes to make sure that they're getting the system that they need day one, right? As soon as they hand over the keys and everything's ready to go. I mean, that's the great thing about working with sustainability partners, and having Camstrip is amazing. They're just great meter. That's the reason we sell them. So
At this point, I could be wrong. We might be Camstrip's #1 customer nationwide because we do this in all, across the country. The reason why that's important though is economies of scale, right? Like we have access to the people right at the top. If there's a problem, if we need something, we've worked on this with other projects where they're like, oh, well, it's, we'd love to get that meter for you, that specialized one, but it's going to come from Denmark and lead time is going to be 6 months. And a couple phone calls later, like it'll be there next month. So kind of situation. And that on an individual basis, community wouldn't have that same power, but through our partnership, because it's just a volume question, we have that access that we can help move that forward because we're really trying to deliver for our customers.
So how well do your programs interface with others? Like, we've got a SCADA system out there now that we need to upgrade and make some changes on, automate some wells and things like that. So if you're going to tie your meter readings into a data stream that'll let a well or an operator know that a well is basically quit pumping water.
Right.
If the SCADA doesn't pick it up, the meter sends out a signal. Would it interface with something in SCADA to sound an alarm or something?
Yeah, that's just part of the integration. So the same thing, just like with your billing software, whether it's your billing software or somebody else's, we just tie our data packets to it. Like, so it's just little integrations that we do. In yours, typically with the sustainability model, they do the full turnkey package. So you're getting the meters, you're getting the install, you're getting customer portals. So in that customer portals also is maybe a mini SCADA style where it'll tie in all your master meters. If you change out your master meters, you have all that data coming in. So it'll tie in the master meters. Then with the usage and consumption of your residential, it can create daily, weekly, or monthly water loss reports automatically for you, all through the software. So it's all designed to have the data at your fingertips and kind of makes your field guys' lives a lot easier, right? Frees them up to do other critical parts of their system while we're using data and analytics to help you guys on daily.
And that goes across the board for any infrastructure, right? We don't use any proprietary software. Everything's got to be open source that can interface with other stuff. It wouldn't make sense for us to do that because if some software company goes out of business with that, then we're screwed. Like we have no eyes or ears on anything. So we use stuff that has to be able to talk to everything else.
This may be a question for Mr. Moyer. Does Encode work with Camstrip metering? Will we have to have upgrades for our current software from Encode and Tyler? Or do you
I
know?
would think
it works.
Yeah,
It works. We have a lot of.
To Encode, are you guys currently in line or in?
AMR and manual.
So Encode itself, we can integrate with it, but sometimes different billing systems have a small fee to do like an AMI upgrade, just basically for on the integration side. Typically, it's a minimal cost. But if you guys are already on AMR, a lot of times you take that hit from the radio read. So it's basically radio read or direct read. And then once you upgrade to radio read, that's the difference. You got AMR and AMI. AMI is where it's collected by towers, and then AMR, you're still physically going to the field and collecting it, but through a radio itself. So depending on info, that's a question that you would have to probably get with them on to see if you guys have already paid that fee, but I'm assuming you have since it's already in the AMR system.
So I'm trying to wrap my mind around that year of installation process. So we're gonna be running two systems simultaneously. The meters that haven't been changed out. Are we
Yes,
billing from two separate systems for part of that year, or is that data fed into the current one, or the billing's still done where it is now?
We usually make that portion pretty easy for you guys, where your billing software Encode will take our data pack from the meters that have been changed out, and it's basically just two routes, right? You have one route from what you're currently using, fed into that billing software, and then as you're upgrading to ours, it's automatically collecting data, and then that integration process makes it easy. So to really answer your question, as you're changing out your system, you're gonna have easier and easier monthly bills, because currently you're 0% on AMI. Where as you get onto AMI, it just eases that data transfer.
And we'll have integration folks that'll work with that. We'll have somebody from our team that's dedicated to the project. They'll work with somebody from Resource Wise, and as well as the installer, as well as the distributor, to make sure the meters are being delivered on time for you. They're gonna be in constant contact with the folks at the city from the start, right? Like even to the level of detail of like, well, let's map out what that route looks like, right? Let's make this make the most sense. Sometimes customers want to start with the ones where they know they're the oldest meter, they're probably the most inaccurate. Sometimes they just have standard routes where they want to go. So that's really up to the coordination there, and the city that has a lot of input into that, like what makes the most sense for doing that process. I think if we could go ahead a couple of slides. Couple more. Here we go, and maybe let Vic talk just a little bit about the features of the Camford meter. We have a couple samples here that we can.
So we have a handful. I mean, there's really, it would probably take a couple hours to go through an in-depth version of the. I'll talk just a couple things on the reliability on the meter. We are the most reliable meter on the market right now. It is an unverified number because we publish our failure rate or our return rate. The ones that we are up against that we can't verify if we are better than are typically the industry's worst, right? They just don't publish their failure rates. So industry-wide, we have the most reliable meter unverified on the market, where we just don't fit, right? We have meters that the way it's designed, there is no penetration point from the water column into the electronics of our meter. Our sensors read through a very thin layer of polymer, so there's no seals basically to fail to get water into our electronics, and it makes our meter extremely reliable. We've been doing ultrasonic meters since 1991. So we are a Danish company. In 91, Camstrup decided to go all in on the ultrasonic technology, which is over a decade longer than the leading ultrasonic manufacturers out there. So we have over a decade longer of doing this, hence why we've actually perfected the design. So we have some engineers back that constantly upgrade, constantly try to find different solutions for water conservation. With our meters being the most reliable, we're also the lowest flow meter. So we go down to 1/100th of a gallon on our low flow. So we have ultra low flow meters. Where nowadays you have the water conservation that's going into more low flow on the industry, right? You have drip lines for your irrigation when you're watering plants. A lot of times people are putting drip irrigation lines there to save on some water. Even ice makers, swamp coolers, things like that. We'll capture pretty much all of that revenue stream for you guys. And then another huge thing on our meters is what Ursula has been we're referring to as our ALD, and that's our acoustic leak detection. And so we have the conventional leak detection, which is done on the homeowner side, which is just through consumption, right? If you have a toilet that's running nonstop for 24 hours, it's gonna say, hey, there's a leak at this residence, you may want to check it out because it's past the meter and we know how much water is going through it, right? And if it never turns off, then technically it's probably a leak, right? With our meters, we have a patented design that actually listens into the water column for leaks before the meter. So we can sense if there's a leak on the service line or on the distribution mains before it gets to the meter. And then send up signals basically saying, hey, somewhere on this block, we're hearing noise from a leak. And then with the saturation of meters on like, say, a city block with a bunch of residential houses, the way the concept typically works is if you have, you know, houses on each side of the road all the way up and there's a leak right in the middle, the meters that are closest to that leak are going to be spiking pretty low. And then as it gets away, the noise levels are going to dissipate. And so we can say, hey, this is probably a mainline leak for you guys. You might want to check right here closest to this address on your main. Now, if it's on a service line, which most conventional leak detections usually struggle to find service line leaks, we actually thrive really well. So a little different on that one. You'll have one meter that's spiking extremely loud because it's hearing the leak on the actual service line. And then you'll either have one meter that's really, really low or just non-existent. And reason for that is because when you have a leak, noise, when it gets into the main, noise will be cut in half and then it'll have to get cut in half again to go up to the next service line, right? So that's kind of in our software, it'll automatically flag it with our analytics and everything and it'll say, hey, these are meters of interest, check these places out. Now in these areas where it's a little bit more rural and you have lines that are a little bit further from each other, that's where ground mics come into play. So you can actually say, hey, we're hearing noise in this area, but you might want to check it out with a ground mic and walk along this kind of stuff. Pretty big key features on those. Any questions on that so far? No? And then I'll talk into my AMI system. So we have we call it a primary frequency. It's on a 400 to 470 megahertz. And basically you own the software or the frequency whenever you come with a Camstra system. It's just like, excuse me. Yeah. Getting a little dry mouth, sorry about that. So you own the frequency with us, which is really, really good. Because so other manufacturers, you're on more of a leased frequency. Sorry, choking up. So anyway, so you're a leased frequency with others, and what that is think of a ballroom, an empty ballroom where you have, you're standing on one side, I'm standing on the other. I'm the collector, you're the meter, and so anyway, so if you talking to me, you can talk a second one. But that same ballroom, if it's full of people, it's going to be a little bit hard, like extra noise chatter going on it. So you'll need a lot of extra listening devices, right? So for us, you need less infrastructure. So for your city, we've actually, if you look into this pamphlet, there is a section that says propagation study. And so on page 4, you can see we zoom this one out just to show you guys' wow fields way back in the. No, it's. You can see that.
It's not.
Yeah, it's.
Okay. So anyway, so this is a propagation study with just one collector. So, and where that's really important is you need less infrastructure with us because we, again, we own the frequency. So things like baby monitors and anything that has radio frequencies can't interfere with ours. You guys will own the frequency. So with that, we can send a stronger signal. And you're only going to need one collector. Majority of your residential is going to be in the green. Now, the ones, if you notice on the very far, I guess, top right corner, those are your well fields. In the event that we put a meter in those and it's not collecting on our infrastructure, with just the one collector, you have two options with us. You can get another pole in that area and do another collector, or we offer a cell meter, which has like a small monthly fee. I think it's like, well, actually, it wouldn't really matter if you went with sustainability because they absorb that. But it's a very small fee. It kind of goes when, like, if you did a full system deployment on cellular, it'd be kind of hefty on the, even if it's say, $5 a year per meter. It's not really much if it's only 10 meters, but if you do 10,000 meters, it could be kind of substantially big, right? So for these, we can kind of filter in some cell meters just to backhaul that data, where 99%, 99.98% of your system is on hourly rate per the prop study with one collector. So that's what we currently have.
So that's something that there's a validation period where we go around and then we work with city officials to say, what do you want to do, right? Here's your options. We can go either way. We're not dictating what it needs to be. We're just saying, here's where your options are going to be. In terms of what we are seeing, and it doesn't have to happen on day one, right? We can say, well, this is what the best thing we want to do. We're going to test this out for several months, see what the reads come back as, and then later on, if we need to change or modify that, that can be done. We'll have built-in costs for that to allow for that to happen.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I got a little choked up on my spill on it, but that's pretty much the brief overview on our AMI solution. Do have like the hybrid system, cellular and RF. Every single one of our meters has a backup. So in the event that our tower goes down, gets hit by lightning or something like that, you guys aren't going to be out of luck, right? We will provide you guys with a backup drive-by system to still be able to collect your reads until sustainability could come out and repair the infrastructure and get you guys up and running, right? So every one of our meters is, whether it's a cellular meter or an RF meter, it can still be read both ways through drive-by or through an solution.
So by looking at those meters, it looks like you've got a base core unit, and then the meter itself sits down inside of that. So,
Oh, yes. Yeah, so
the
this,
reading mechanism sits down inside of that, but you're reading through the pipe.
yes.
Off of some.
So if you look in here. And then on the inside,
But inside, you can see where it's.
yeah, so on there, this is just for example purposes, so I can actually feed on it, and it actually sounds like metal, and people will say it's not metallic meters. So you can actually bang on it and say, hey, it's not a plastic meter, right? So that's the reason it's kind of empty, but we do have inside of our meters, you'll see it on this one. They're what we call the reflectors.
You can open that bit. This one.
You didn't ask.
We know the manufacturers.
So on the inside, those are probably what you're looking at. Those are reflectors. So with ultrasonic technology, you have acoustic reflectors that bounce sound. And so the way these meters work is you have two sound signals that send a frequency down at the exact same time. And depending on the difference in time it takes for that noise to go down and across, it's basically calculating the velocity of the flow of the water, right? So you have a sound that comes here to here to here. And if water's moving this way, the noise that goes against the flow of water will come back slower than the noise going towards it. And depending on the difference in time, that's going to find your velocity. And that's how we calculate the flow. But yeah, that's what those reflect.
This is gonna last a lot longer than a vein meter or.
Mechanical meter, as they call them.
Meters.
Yeah, your current meters, lasting is probably an understatement of those. What our meters do is we warranty them for 20 years, but not only do they last, they actually operate at a high level for the entire 20 years. Acoustic meters in general just don't unless the battery dies on them, they're just accurate. There's nothing to wear out in the meter. The static meters, no moving parts, nothing to wear out in them. So the accuracy over time, in 20 years, it's gonna be just as accurate as it was on day one. Where a mechanical meter, you put it in the ground for 20 years, it's gonna slow down and it's gonna be a lot less accurate than it was on day one.
So I know you kind of have helped me on this part, but there's a little more, okay. We replace meters all the time. I know you do, because Jay is out there all the time. And I guess my deal is, what are we doing with all the meters we've got? I mean, some of them are not all that old. Some of them are real old. Some of them, so how do we go about that process without wasting the money we've already spent?
Well, that's an excellent question. So they're gonna have some salvage value to them. Just depends on what it is. There might be some remaining life to it. That's city property, that's your property. Right?
So if we've got an old one that it hasn't been replaced yet, they could take one of the newer ones you replaced and move it to a location where there's no, till you get to it. And that's that whole 1 year process is what I'm getting at.
I mean, if that's efficient way to do that, we could. I mean, I think we would want to look at how fast we're gonna do it. I mean, we gave it a year just to estimate it based off of the number, but like, we could, because you're in a part of the state where it's not as affected by weather conditions, like the Angel Fire, for example, we don't have to stop work in December, so we can keep working year round. We might be able to get this thing done as quickly as possible. So it might not be an efficiency, but there is probably still some residual value to that. There might be a secondary market for something. I don't know if that's the case. If they're older and they're mechanical and there's metal in there's salvage value. We have some, like in Angel Fire, they're collecting them right now, and then they'll just sell them mass, or maybe they'll have somebody come in that'll get out the salvage value to that. Whatever that residual value is, that's for the city to keep, right? And they can utilize that however you'd like to.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
I'm sorry I'm late, but you probably already covered this. The meter's new. What about the customer side? If I have a house and I connect to this meter, is that gonna be an extra cost to the customer to hook on to the new meter system?
Right, that's a great question. No, there wouldn't be. So we'd be just swapping that out. The cost would be then just on a monthly basis for the usage of that to the city. But the way that these projects work out, the cost savings that you'll get from the increased revenue would cover that cost plus some. The customer may see an increase in their bill, but it's not because the rate increased. It's not because they're paying for the infrastructure. It's just because they're more accurately accounting for the water that they're actually using. And so that's where that increase tends to happen. And what we've actually seen in many of our customers, and when we do these full systems deployments, is we actually delay the time in which that community needs to do a rate increase. Because what they're doing is they have a more efficient system now that's more self-sustaining. Now they actually don't have to do a rate increase as soon because they got the excess revenue by just through the efficiency first. Now, over time, obviously, water rates don't remain static. So that's another thing that we're flexible with, is what we encourage our customers to look at is what is your growth rate going to look like in your rate structure over time? You have a statute that says it grows by 1 or 2% per year, or maybe every 3 to 4 years, you do a 5 to 6% increase. Whatever that number looks like, we will then we can model that and we can utilize that for an escalation factor on our side, so that as our usage rates grow, they're actually growing and tied and in tandem with your water rates. So what that does is that makes it even more affordable on the early years, then freeing up even more revenue for you to reinvest in the system. So we'll get to the we sort of modeled out what the financials for, and I actually did that at a 1% escalator, 2% escalator, 3%. That we can go 4, we can go 0, we can do whatever we want. It's really for the city to decide and let us know what makes the most sense. But that flexibility is built in, and we'd like, we try to tie that to that as best we can, so that it's more sustainable. Does that address the question?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you, sir. And maybe we'll go to that if I think it's the page after this. So, so this is the project financials for this. Again, we modeled it off of the costs that were included in there on the budget. and the quotes we got from Resource Wise for the materials. We've included in this all of our costs. So this is, we tried to account for everything. And that would be affiliated, and we also have a contingency built into this for the construction side. A lot of times for meter projects, particularly in a place like Portal, like you're not gonna have a lot of unknown factors here like we would in locations where we're going 3, 4, 5 foot deep. In some of these where you have that contingency, you usually have to dig into that because there's unknown factors here. Your meters are a little more shallow here, a lot more predictable. So if we don't dig into that contingency, then that would just reduce the cost at the end. Again, it's just cost plus, but this is just how we can sort of break this down on a monthly basis. This is a per meter per month, so we're going to be tracking for performance and seeing how many meters are in operation that month or functioning that month for this purpose. And so for the deployment, how that would work is like you're only actually going to be charged for the usage when that meter is actually commissioned. You've accepted it, that is functioning, and you can see it and you're tracking it in your billing software. So that first year, what you're going to see is, after the first month of doing it, it'll be a certain number, several hundred, and then it'll just keep growing over that. But you won't actually see a bill. It's unlikely to ever see a bill that's exactly this number over time, right? Because it's going to have a natural fluctuation of how many are actually functioning that particular month. So that's how we do it. We bake into the cost, insurance costs. That's another financial protection that we have in here. Our maintenance and care reserves is another financial protection. And then software hosting and training, all those costs are in there. We of course figure out what that is, annual cost, and then we amortize that, bake that into a monthly cost. It comes as a separate bill, but it's just here to show you the full amounts. And I think the next slide will show you how that last number, then this kind of translates if we were to continue to, again, we're just looking at what the balance might be for the city. We have some customers that have an automatic 2% growth every year. So we just go ahead and use a 2%. But this is completely flexible and in your control to decide what makes the most sense for this. Standard is like a 1% escalator, but then of course we can keep going, and the higher the escalator, the lower those first years are, but that'll grow over time just with your water rate. So we try to help have our customers think through what they estimate that might actually look like. They'd be surprised at some customers in the country where they're like talking about 7, 8, 10% rate increases every 3 years just because of the cost of water. So this actually balances out. And we're like, well, let's just keep it a little bit lower. Like we don't want to see that amount jump year to year. So I think
Any questions up until this point?
yeah, the last slide we had was just we started with that one, which is there's a customer here in this area, Roosevelt County Water Co-op. Heard of them?
She should have came.
There's a lady usually has colorful hair around talking about those. But we have other customers here. You talk to the folks down in Jow, we're almost complete with their deployment there. Up in Angel Fire, we have dozens of customers all across the country. We're working on developing several other water meter projects here throughout the state as well.
Just like to go off with this system, our customers would be able to put an app on their phone and see their water usage.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Some do, some don't.
Yeah. Probably frightening,
Yeah.
And one thing we can do if it would benefit the community for that is, we can even, during the deployment early on, have like a town hall kind of opportunity where we talk about, not just what to expect during installation, where to see that, but then talk through the app and answer questions there. Again, this is new technology. We have the resources here that we have the experts that know more about it than anybody at the city would. So we're more than happy to answer those questions for the.
I heard a first-hand account of a person that I know that was on vacation and they got a call from the co-op saying, hey, we think you got a leak on your side. And so they were able to get them to go out and shut off service until they got back. That hadn't happened. They had an astronomical bill, but they could feel just by looking at the meters that was on the user side, not on their main line. So
Yeah, and on the customer portal, typically the customer has access to, when they do sign up, they do really good and they verify that the customer's been notified. But they have kind of like snowbird notifications for people that, you know, they go on vacation for a couple months. They put their house on vacation mode where any drop of water goes through, they get notified, hey, you got some usage going in and it could potentially be a leak, right? We like to, for the community, we like to get them to understand that if their water bill may go up, right? Because now they're actually being charged for the amount of water that they're using. But what these meters do, and what we've seen them do a lot of times is not just raise people's water bill, it helps them with water conservation, but we've seen some customers that have had some small slab leaks that old mechanical meters just weren't picking up. It was a small leak that was going on for years, and then all of a sudden they put one of our meters in and said, hey, you got a leak. Next thing you know, they got a plumber going out there. There was a slab leak. If it would have been left going on for, you know, any longer, it could have caused, you know, foundation damage to their house and things like that. So, you know, on top of, you will get those customers that, hey, my bill's high, no way I paid, no way I'm using this much, but it is also designed to help protect the homeowners in general.
One other thing that, you know, we don't usually put in our studies, but it's important here in New Mexico. You know, we've been talking to the folks at the Environment Department quite a bit. And just on the regulatory space that they're looking at, you know, they're not going lighter. I'll say they're getting more intense. And one of the things that they really want to know is they want to have better data about water and water usage. This system, all of this, I mean, you have 1,000 ways that you can write and run reports that are needed for the regulators on this space. That's going to improve your standing with the state on that. The other thing about data, and this comes from my former world, is that data, you can utilize that data when you start to understand where, you know, prioritize where your line improvements need to happen, where you have significant leaks and you want to go to the revolving loan fund, or you want to go to one of these other ones. They're going to want to know data that's going to support your grant application for all of those. You're going to be able to say, look, we have data, here's exactly what it's just strengthening your ability to get other funding in by having all of that accurate information.
Yeah, I can't see how it wouldn't help us with the state when we're trying to go ask for more money, that we have data that's valid and accurate.
That leak detection platform actually does really good on that aspect because it actually documents, you know, size of the leak. There's once you actually find the leak, it says, hey, there's a leak here, right? Well, there's a way to deactivate that leak, and it asks you for some data, right? How big was the leak? How long was it going on? Things like that. But all of that is reportable documents. Say you have a leak 20 times in the same line. Well, now you have that documented through our software that you can send a report to the state when you're asking for money. Say, hey, you know what, on this street right here, I got, you know, about 1,000 feet of 8-inch ductile that I need to replace. It's blown on us 20 times in the last year. It's getting old. It's getting hard to maintain. We need help to replace this line. So.
On this number, the quote that you gave us, was that figuring doing the well field? Did you plan on that? Or?
Yeah, we have that.
It's in there.
It's in there.
Yep.
And these are all just early estimates. Like, again, it's based off every information. We have no reason to doubt the information, but like we'll verify that as we go through. And it's not a locked in number. It's not, we'll charge up to that. Ultimately, the cost is going to be associated with whatever the cost was for the system. So over time, and this is another important point, if you continue to grow as a community, you want to add additional meters. Like we have an ability to add additional meters after initial installation to this too, where we're just supplying. If it's just a handful, we'll just supply them to the city and they can just install them, or if the developer's putting them in. But we can just continue to add those service points over time. So it's not a fixed moment in time where this is happening. We're just trying to work through the system. If you have additional wells that get added on, you need new meters for that, or some go offline, you know, we anticipate, in fact, we expect that to be variable over time.
Okay. Tell me again the timeline. You said about a year, but to assess it and do everything, I mean, assuming we want to move forward, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, the benefit of this part of the stage, we can get started whenever, and so there's no calendar break in terms of construction availability. We started talking with JAL in November of 23 and started installs in June. It really takes us probably probably about 60 to 90 days from a signed addendum to when we have a notice of proceeding to start deploying. Really, the timing factor is most influenced by the shipping dates and availability of the larger meters. So what we'll do is we'll, as soon as we can, get an order in for those and then start working on the ones that are available. We anticipate 12 months for this to get everything done. But the actual construction is much shorter than that because we're gonna have a lot of crews going. I mean, it's gonna go super fast. So I think, if the city decides to move forward here in January, we'll be installing these by the beginning of summer at the latest.
It took us about 6 months, but that wasn't a full time. That's what I was telling you. They would come for about 2 weeks and then they might leave for 2 weeks and then they come for 2 weeks. And they only really had 3, I think, on their entire crew, 3 or 4, I guess 4. And we just started at what we call book 1. So we just started at book 1, route 1, first one, and said, here, take off. And that's how it was set up in their system. As far as, and that 6 months, really, we installed the last meter because it was one of the larger ones and we were waiting for some parts. And as far as the billing, as soon as they kind of get started and they start collecting data, we just pulled reads out of Reedy for 50 or 100 meters, but my guys were still reading. So we were stumbling over the top of each other a little bit, but not enough that it didn't. It may have added for the girls a day to billing, but that was mostly just because one of the other things that we did was when we went with these meters, we went from billing 1,000 to billing 1 gallon. So before, if you used 2,500 gallons, you might only get billed for 2,000. Now, if you use 2,572, you're getting billed for 2,572. We took it down to a gallon. So.
Yeah, but I'll get a better sense on the timing and in terms of availability on the installers, but as I look out on this, like we're in January, I would fully expect us to get this thing done this calendar year.
So on an inside question for Chris, Eric, you guys. Thoughts, I'd like to hear thoughts from you guys.
On sustainability and
On the general idea of doing this.
I mean, absolutely. We've been fighting, trying to get this thing squared away since I started. I know it was a program started. Program started back before I was hired on, sometime in like 2006-07. They're contracted out, and the city of Portales decided they were going to install these meters themselves. So since then to now, we've been fighting, trying to get these meters installed ourselves. So I mean, it would take a lot off of our plate as operators.
Okay.
Just for simple fact that it would be a robust system where, it's kind of a man multiplier in a sense. So I'm all for it.
You think it would help you manpower wise?
Absolutely.
Especially after.
Yes.
They actually asked you a question.
Oh, they asked me a question.
How you felt about it?
Mike asked what the team thought about moving forward with the idea.
And even more so in the well field, because I mean, we got
mechanical meters and, with our well field in the water, we don't pull from a rock formation, we pull from the sand and gravel, so. That sand is constantly being in that water a little bit, which plugs up and slows down those mechanical meters, so. We really need a more.
Well, and it seems like it's gonna help with that report we got last month where we.
Right, yeah, where it says that.
More coming out than we built. For.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of the meters wise is because probably the meters out there are, some of them don't work, It's me and one other guy and we have, we have to send those, when they go down, we have replacements that are rebuilt, we send them off to get rebuilt, but sometimes, especially now, it takes 4 months to get those meters back, sending them off to get rebuilt, so. I mean, getting away from the mechanical meter to a ultrasonic's we'll be able to read exactly how much water we're pulling from the aquifer and.
And you said you replaced the trunk at Angel Fire. I assume that's the pipe coming out of the ground. When you talked earlier.
It's the meter setting. I don't know if you want to explain the.
So yeah, so they sit in cans typically, which are offset into the ground. Because Angel Fire, they have their depths are pretty crazy. They have some of them 9 feet. So we're replacing those cans, and those are specific to what they need in Angel Fire, right? Out here, it's not gonna be anything like that, but that was all covered through sustainability partners, right? Like they sat down and we figured out with talks through the city, what do you guys need? And to be honest, they ran into situations they didn't even know they had also. And they said, hey, you know what? We need something different that we didn't realize we had, because there's new people in there and stuff was installed 15, 20 years ago, right? They don't know exactly what's in there, unfortunately. So we were able to go in and say, okay, let's figure out what you guys need. We get with Ryan's team, and we sit down, we hash it out, right? We order what we need, we get that up there, and then we get the installers to go in and install it. And I mean, we really work hand in hand. And the sustainability partners, that's really what it is. It's a partnership, right? Between the manufacturer, between us, the project management team, distributors of the meters to sustainability partners, right? And then we work with L&T, who's the installers or whoever we choose, right? And the reason we're not using L&T is just because of the size of the project. So otherwise they would probably be doing it. And I talked with Ryan, or not Ryan, sorry. I talked with Aaron, who's the CEO and of Resource Wise, and he figures for installation from when we get started, and obviously there's other things, he thinks it's like 3 to 4 months that we can get meters in the ground. So within whenever we start to put them in, it's about 3 to 4 months.
It's not gonna be a 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 2 weeks. On.
No, not with
Yeah,
you.
I don't think so. Again, I can't talk for the installers, right? Because they're
DB is
their own company, but they're pretty big.
DB is a little bit of a bigger company.
Yeah.
Hence why they use them on this one. We have them on a system similar to this that they're doing deployment in Colorado. And they're estimating to get that done. They're starting April and they want to have it done. It's in Breckenridge, Colorado, so they want to have it done before the ski season and stuff. So I think they're 5,600 meters or something like that. So they're estimating about a good 6 months to get that done.
And if you've ever been to Breckenridge, I'm from Colorado, so I know Breckenridge very well. Those things are spread out. They're not, it's pretty harsh terrain, so it's gonna increase that time to do it here. It's slightly weird.
Yeah, and I've got a meeting with them tomorrow, so I can get back to exactly what their timeframe is for this particular geography and environment. But yeah, the cans and Angel Fire, so these were specialized cans, like the reason why they hadn't been replacing a lot is 1, they're really expensive, 2, they didn't have the manpower to do it or the money, and 3, they're a 1.5 back order for the existing manufacturer. We got all of them ordered and everyone that they needed and got it delivered in 6 months. We just have to go around and find, like, basically when you sign up and say, hey, we want you to deliver this in this time frame, it's on us to do it, right? We have to go and figure it out. So
just thinking back at what some of the questions our community may ask, what's the time frame when they go to change out the meter that the resident will be without water?
Oh, not,
5-10 minutes.
yeah, 15 at the most. I mean, now, wait, hold on.
The setter doesn't blow up. And
Yeah.
something.
No. You'll have a few instances where the installer turns the valve, changes everything out and hops on to the next one and forgets to turn the water back on. So then it might be a little bit longer delay.
Well, and I knew when y'all changed the one at my house, I didn't have a clue,
Yeah,
but I knew that it would be important to ask that question
absolutely.
in the public with everybody hearing.
Yes.
That way, the people making the decision have that to fall back on when the community asks them.
well, and it's a really important point for the engagement with the community around this. And, we'll have a whole, I mean, again, that's why I like having like a town hall session, working with the city's, marketing communications team to let folks know where we're going to be at. And look, if there's ever any issues that's not happening, you're going to have multiple people that call to complain. And we'll get back and we'll get it righted really quickly, right? Because that's our responsibility to make sure that happens.
Well, and I know it won't be the same as because we're currently kind of going through an electrical, the meters being changed out by Phil as well. And I know their rates went up at the same time our meters are getting changed, so our bills this last month went, all over town, but there was the compound of the fact that their rates went up and they gave these more efficient meters that are probably making a better reading on our homes than what we had in the past. So I think it would be really important. Communication with the community's gotta be huge here, that they understand. You may be paying more, but you should have been paying more all along.
Yeah.
Correct.
And this is what we've gotta do to save the water we've got. I mean, there's just gonna be a lot of communication we've got to do, but.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big things is, you know, we obviously have an aging infrastructure. We have not typically as a city built a fund to replace that aging infrastructure. I think this is a good thing. When I went to the infrastructure conference back in October, I knew we had issues with meters and we were talking about well meters and house meters. So I stopped at Camstrup's table and Sustainability Partners was right next door. They were telling me about their meters and then they told me, you know, hey, talk to this guy. And then, you know, right there on their table is this thing from the co-op. And I don't know how many people actually knew that they had done this. But I know I didn't. And
I would imagine a lot of city customers didn't know.
correct. And it's my job to go out and find things like this for our residents to make sure that we have trying to provide them with the best service and the best quality things. That's my job and that's my job to give to you. And then it's your job to make that decision.
Well, some of this is for us, those of us that are new, the fact, Chris, what you said a while ago about the fact y'all been trying, the plan was in place for over, sounds like about 15 years.
Quite some
We've been
time.
trying to get these meters replaced. Obviously, that's not the answer. We can't keep doing a limited number a year because manpower, we don't have it, we know that, but I didn't know it had been going on for that long. And to bring somebody in and get this done in 1 year. Now you guys can concentrate on the lines and the other parts of the infrastructure and get your mind off the meters seems beyond logical. It's just a no-brainer.
And the change out and all of that is really smooth. I'm assuming that they'll use the same thing with the work order system. They take a picture of the old meter, they take a picture of the new meter. So now it's probably not going to be as common for the city as it was for us because of how spread out we are. But there were times where they may have replaced this meter over here, or they replaced this one, but they tied it to the wrong address because our system is confusing. But it was easy to catch it because it was easy to go back and look at the meter number or the read and go, oh, well, they replaced A instead of B, or they switched A and B or whatever.
Well, like you were saying earlier too, even on our mapping software, we tie in kind of like Google Maps, so you know that little walking guy that's on there, we have that in our system to where you can actually get a street view with a dot over where your meter location is at. So if it's off, you can actually drag that dot and sometimes you can see the meter pit on the map and you can just put the meter pit on it, the dot on. So,
And I agree, yours being spread out and A, B, may be confusing, but I mean, we got a whole lot of apartment complexes in town that have some very. I manage a bunch of them that have very confusing meters with 4 or 5 in the same can. You know, I mean, there's some of that I think we can get a real handle on. Not that but we keep finding them because our staff works hard and we work together as customers, but. Man, it'd be nice. I think it would just be so much help for Chris and you guys.
well, what sustainability brings to you guys as well is, you know, you got that extra set of hands to help maintain and manage your meter systems if you went this route. But now a lot of times systems, they're looking for the meter change out now. Like, how am I going to find the money to change the meters now? They're not looking for 15, 20 years down the road. How am I going to change them in the next 15, 20 years? With this concept, they're constantly adapting. So not only they have that little nest egg he was talking about to where you're changing all your meters out now within the year, but then you're never having to worry about the next upgrade because he's constantly maintaining and taking care of the system because that's how they get paid.
Right. Yeah, and you know, we talk a lot about useful lives because that's industry standard for how we think about, that's how you budget for something, that's how you pay for it. Nobody actually knows how long a meter is going to last, right? Like not all 5,000 of these meters are going to last exactly 20 years, right? And along those time, there's going to be stuff that happens And we don't know what the cause of that is. Maybe there's a freeze that happened that we didn't anticipate. All of a sudden, the ones that were a little bit higher than the frost line, they burst, right? Or something happens in a truck roll or something, or whatever it is, the battery, the ones that are closer to the collector are easy, but the ones further away. So the thing is for us is stability across the system, right? And we spread out that risk across the whole system. So you're never left at a moment where you're not getting the right data, where you're not getting the right revenues. It's just stay. It's just the goal is, again, sustainability, stability in your system. And that's what we're constantly going to be working with. And we're not going to be doing it isolated. You're not going to be doing it isolated. We're going to be talking all the time.
Mr. Warrior, question for you. Did you talk to him about, we had the water report from EPCOR, we got a little
bit
on the well field.
Mhm.
And, there were some concerns, electrical,
Yes.
concrete padding, and I was
Correct.
thinking the trunk, but the piping that comes out of the
Mhm.
ground, some are tie strapped down to hold them together.
Correct.
Would all that have the possibility of getting upgraded electrical with sustainability partners? To your knowledge?
We can.
Yeah, it's a service that you can continue to use.
It's not part of this original.
This is one piece of it. This is just a kind of a start. But yes.
But
The
if it
meters
was,
are what's gonna make you guys money. So that's why.
And
we
that's
always
gonna
start
push
at
everything
meters,
else.
Cause that's your cash register, right? So when you change out, you do a full turnkey solution and you immediately get brand new meters in the ground 100%. That's typically you'll see a revenue increase, and the extra revenue that you get could be used for projects like this. And then sustainability partners can fill in the holes of what it doesn't capture.
However, to add to that, if it's just like, it's not a big scope of project, but just some work that needs to be done that we can do while we're already mobilized to do the thing. That can be included. It just depends.
That's a whole other project.
Got it.
if
I don't know the scope of it, so we'll leave that at that.
We'll talk later.
to me, it's important to be at the well field to have the meters out there.
Correct.
And there's a lot of piping that's probably not adequate to put those meters on, so you're gonna have to do some form of fashion of upgrades out there,
I mean, yes and no.
in my opinion.
I mean, it would be beneficial to, if you're there, fix it and do it right. While you have the chance to do it.
And we can look at that.
We could honestly work hand in hand with them. I mean, we could do the work out there to make those necessary upgrades. It'd just be a matter of us getting with them, and if that's the route we choose to take.
And maybe it's just 5 or 6 that I'm thinking of, but I'm thinking.
Right, and it's not all of them, and some of the well pads that do need to be corrected, we're gonna do in-house.
If you do the worst ones, but if you're there and the piping needs to be replaced anyways, I guess.
Right.
My thought is. Do it at that time, don't.
Well, the crew's efficiency will only be increased by taking off the meter project to free them up to do all the other tasks too.
Can I holler a question at you guys? Aside from flow, can these meters also read pressure?
The meters themselves do not have pressure. You would have to have a third party network come in for pressures. But no, they do temperatures. Of course, they read the meters, but we have temperature and pressure. We actually tend to the pressure concept of things. We like the pressure to be more on like the main line, and there's better solutions in the industry to get pressure than on a residential water meter. It just doesn't give you the full scope of what it is. So anytime you have pressures, we kind of say, hey, get something on your main line, even better through like a fire hydrant or some other type of technology. Yeah. That was a good song.
I don't even have the source, but I'm fine if anybody else in the public has questions. If they want to ask me, I want to hear them too, so.
Well,
Alan, you got anything?
yeah, I do. I want to go back to Mike's.
Can you move the microphone?
Back to Mr. Davison's question and directed to the well field on pressure. Those coming off the pumps before it gets to the meter. And I think that's what one of the things that he was asking. I mean, you could put a a nipple and put a pressure gauge on that if you wanted to do, so that you could find out exactly how much pressure each pump is pumping compared to what they're supposed to be pumping against one another, and how much pressure loss that those wells are pumping against each other, because there's some of those wells, and I know we're talking meters, but because that they don't have that upgrade in those meters, I do think that that's something that the council ought to look at, is putting pressure gauges at each pump, so that you know what the pressure is. If one's 60 pounds and one's 20 pounds, well, you're not getting much out of the 20 pounds, because the other 60 pounds was pumping against it. And so you've got wells, that's going to be beneficial too, along with the meters. So.
I mean, I can sort of. Maybe. Yes, we do need to do that upgrade. I think the new meters, increasing our revenue will help us do those upgrades. And that's really what we're trying to get at right now is we know we need to do that. And that's something that we can talk to them about at a later time. But that's one of my things is increase our revenue, try to get money flowing so that we can improve our infrastructure.
I think I want to add to that, probably what you mean is it's where it's automated in the system, so where you can read it, where there's manual read, but we obviously have.
We do have
Manual.
We're talking a SCADA system.
The SCADA system, yeah, automated.
Yes.
Okay.
And the state is more than just reading it, and it's actually controlling the wells and everything. So,
Right. So we're looking at all those things.
For it leak inside of a person's house.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have that experience?
Absolutely. We've had lots, Alan and I were actually just talking a minute ago too. His mom had went outside to water. Went in the house. And, yep, let hose on. Instantly the next morning. It's like it was saying, it has to be 24 hours because, it's not 100% smart. Greg, I called Greg on Friday and said, hey, don't know what you got going on, but looks like on one of them, it was using 20-ish, and it'll give us hourly reads. And so then we have to kind of look at the time and say, okay, it was 4 o'clock in the morning, chances are nobody was up or anything. And then we kind of look at it to see where it's consistently staying at. And then that's when we call you and say, hey, it's like it's using about 20-25 gallons an hour. You probably got a leak. Greg's hand had left the water dripping because it was
10 minutes to find out what was going on and solve the problem.
Yeah.
Instead of
That's saving a lot of money.
Absolutely. You heard here when I mentioned that our usage, the amount of water that we purchased from the city in 2024 was down about 30 million gallons. And I think, yeah, about 6%. So, and I think a lot of that is, we're doing a lot of other things too, and there's a lot of other things going on privately with different entities, but I think a big part of that was saving on customers' water leaks.
Along on that line, Oscar, after they found that the water line was on, and we shut that off the next month, we still had a leak, and we could not find it. But we had a leak, and guess what? We finally found it, but it took about 2 weeks. So we don't know how much water we had lost because it was a small leak and the line was 3 foot deep, and that particular line was in sand, but they found it. The movers found it, so we got that fixed, and it's a water saving technique.
Well, that's kind of the one I had. It didn't service for another 10 days and 2 weeks, but we were just waiting around for something to happen. I mean, if you didn't have that data and then let me know something to watch for something, that leak might have went on for 3-4 weeks before somebody said, hey, there's a puddle. out
Yeah,
there.
and one of the other things that we're noticing now, and it's finally starting to kind of catch up because we've had them for a year now, is we have people that have actually had a leak for no telling how long. But what's happening is we put that meter in. And because it's always had water going through it, since it was put in, it doesn't necessarily recognize it as a leak. It just recognizes it as normal occurrence. But so now we've had the time and the ability to start going back and looking at this, and we don't just look at a leak code. We might, or the person will come in and say, gosh, you know, I was talking to my neighbor and we're two, single ladies, we both live alone. Her water bill's only this much, mine's this much. Well, we start going back and looking and we're like, well, okay, here's the problem. You've had a leak since we put, or you had something going on since we put this meter in, and you consistently run 25, 50, 80 gallons of water through the meter every hour. But the meter just thinks that's normal, so it's not flagging it as a leak. Well, you've got a leak. They call someone out, they find it, and all of a sudden they go, and now they're just happy because their bill's the same as Margaret's every month, they're just happy as can be.
Well, and sometimes that may be, because these meters are customizable as well.
Yeah.
So if you get, what we try to eliminate is false alarms too, right? So you may actually have a meter that you want to turn that feature off or adjust it, because they have leak and burst. And so the burst is high flow, customizable, but with a percentage of your top flow, I guess, at a set amount of time, which is typically about 30 minutes. So what it's trying to do is sense a burst in a home to protect the homeowner from, hey, maybe he's at the store or who knows what the case is, but all of a sudden their line just blew up inside their house. And so to eliminate extensive damage, it'll send the utility, and if they have a customer portal, the actual customer themselves, a burst alarm. And they say, hey, there's something going on in my house, I need to check it out, I got a burst alarm. The leak is more of a smaller flow, a constant smaller flow, but you can customize it to where maybe it won't send a leak alarm if it's under 1/10 of a gallon or something. Maybe you set the meter and it was just under the threshold, right? Those are things where you can customize the meter, right? You can put it on for everything if you want. Any kind of flow for 24 hours, if it's constantly going on, you can set the alarm, right? But we've seen so many, one of our most aggressive case studies that we've seen is on the ALD side, and this is for non-revenue water. This is before it even passes through the meter, right? So homeowners, as bad as it sounds, with your mechanical meters, if they have a small flow and it's a leak, you can cause damage to the house, and you guys are actually giving them that leak for free. With these new meters, if you have those leaks, you're at least going to get the revenue for it, but now you can tell a customer, hey, you may have a leak at your house, let's go protect your asset. Now on the ALD side, that's a non-revenue before it even gets into a meter. And one of the most aggressive things that we've seen is we had a situation with a new customer, did a deployment, he had like 50-some% water loss. Immediately seen about a 12 to 15% reduction just from changing out meters. And the rest of it was just leaky pipes in the system. And so on one of his leaks, we told him, hey, in this area, at this address, we think you have a leak. We're hearing noise half a mile away from this location. And the customer's like, well, I don't think so, but we'll go check it out. And they went to this address. And they seen this, this natural spring, of course, that's been going for 30+ years. They're like, well, we dug it up and there was a 30-gallon-a-minute leak going on. And the reason it never surfaced is because it was going into this natural spring, feeding into somebody's pond. So they replaced it or fixed the line. Everything was all good. And about 2 months later, that natural spring and that pond dried up.
No.
It's been named on Google Maps as a certain spring, been going on for 30+ years, and we calculated at about 30 gallons a minute. For the last 30 years, they lost about 500 million gallons of water just for that one leak. So those are things that these systems are finding. It's not just putting the total of the revenue increase on the homeowners. What you're doing is you're doing water conservation on there, but also tightening up your system. to where your non-revenue goes down, and then on top of everything, your OpEx also goes down, because now you're having to produce less water to feed them. Not necessarily that you're charging for less water, it's just less water is going back into the ground that you're having to make. So,
Which, of course, you know, the amount of water you need to produce, treat, deliver. Goes down, you know, the other piece to that is just the ongoing burden on your system itself, right? It's less water that has to flow through that. It's not gonna be significant everywhere, but. But back to your point, on the production meters, it's like this, you really need both sides of the equation to really understand. What's going on with your system.
Well, I think it can help us a lot on the conservation side, you know, I told some of these guys. When I had my knee replaced in the summer, I walked 2 or 3 in the morning, you know, just because I needed the exercise. We do find a lot of people watering 2 and 3 in the morning on days they're not supposed to be watering. Well, our city guys don't have time to go check that 2 or 3 in the morning. But this system can alert them that people are watering middle of the night.
Sure.
Yes.
And start shutting that kind of stuff down, and I think we can conserve a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a tattletale for him.
That's a really case of you're saving 30 million gallons, right? I mean,
Yeah.
That's a big number.
We lost a lot of revenue when you did that.
It's not always revenue. It's like we said, if it's not getting to the meter itself, it may be, you know, 30 million gallons that's just not coming out of a leaking pipe. You know, we're finding leaks and stuff like that. So non-revenue water is what we're trying to eliminate, something that's not getting to the meter. Right?
Anything else?
I
We're good?
never know how these things work, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I want it on the agenda to vote on as soon as possible. I don't care.
Okay.
I know everybody jumps on me when I jump on stuff, but it's too logical for me to just sit here and not do something.
I know,
Okay.
I know out in the well field, the city owns the water right, or we get the water rights from the OSC and stuff like that. And I know it's regulated. Do you guys have to submit any permits or anything like that to them as far as changing out a meter to a certain degree, or is it just something that you guys would go in and just swap out if that was the case? Because
I'm not an expert on the installation, so I'll have to
Okay.
defer to our partners on that. I would say if we do, we coordinate that. There's all, you know, most majority of our projects require some level of permit. So we just coordinate that with the city and what needs to happen.
I do know that on the website, I think there's a brochure, there might be a guideline there to follow, but just out of curiosity.
To change out meters in general, do you guys have to do permitting?
Mhm.
It would be just
Like in the city,
you know.
inside the
just have to-
distribution system.
The serial number, we have to turn in the serial number when we change it out, and then the old meter reading and then the new meter reading. And then we have to update the serial number for that meter.
We'll have all that information.
We'll have that in our meter exchange
We gather
software.
all that when we do the installation. In fact, that's some of the things I go through. That's part of our quality control.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, we have a meter exchange software that all that stuff gets logged.
I guess
into.
that's the question I was trying to get at, yeah.
Yeah, we have a software for that. Typically things that we need permits for are the FCC license because it is a primary frequency, like we were saying, network. We have to go to the FCC and actually get a license for the collector and the asset.
Okay.
But that's about it. And that's something that we take care of in-house for you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
This is with Chris Moore, Chris Mendoza question. Do we have to have phases like well field? It's all gonna be.
Well, I'm sure we'll figure out the deployment strategy.
Another question is you're gonna visit with the mayor and city and put it on the agenda?
There's a few things I have to do first.
Okay. Some things we have to do.
There are some things I have to do. And yeah, Mayor's not here.
Yeah, he can request it.
Correct. There's a few other things I have to do though.
As far as deployment, we like to recommend doing the revenue meters first, large meters. So typically what we see is what's gonna get you the most money upfront, right? Large meters, residential, stuff like that. And then your wow meters, they're important. But they're to verify how much water you're actually bringing in, right? So typically it goes residential large meters, things like that first.
Jim was saying, he was saying January, I see February.
There is I mean, the last thing I would say, just in terms of the process, is we do have an interim step in terms of validation, so. You know, the vote on it and move it forward on the addendum, it's, then we go through a period of validation with our partners, just to make sure all the scope is correct, that everything is exactly what we need. And then after that period happens, then there's a notice to proceed, so, that then just gives, that's an extra step. Where the city's not actually financially obligated until there's a notice to proceed, where we do a due diligence phase for that. So that's helpful in answering some of these questions in terms of process, in terms of needs, et cetera. And so I just mentioned that in terms of like a vote to approve it is significant, and we really love this project. We think it'd be really great for us and for the city. And then, but there is still another a safety step for the city, so that we can bring back more information once we do our due
You come back
diligence.
at that point, and it's double or whatever we could say.
We would let you know exactly. Yeah, we don't wanna, it's, again, it's open book. Everything here is based off of best information that we have, and we think it's pretty good. And honestly, for meter projects, it usually doesn't change that much. But, you know, there is that built into there where the city's not actually financially obligated until we've done all that due diligence, so you know exactly what you're gonna get.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks.
Thank
See you.